Millionaire offers job to struggling single mom, then shocks her with unexpected marriage proposal. Sarah's world shattered the moment she received the eviction notice. 3 months behind on rent, no savings, and a 5-year-old son who looked at her with unwavering trust. It was a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. But what happened next was even more unbelievable. Imagine being offered a high-paying job by a reclusive millionaire, a man who seemed to exist in a different universe. He wasn't offering just a job, though. He was offering a lifeline. But this lifeline came with a twist, a shocking proposition that would blur the lines between professional and personal, between gratitude and something far more complex. Sarah, already burdened with the weight of single motherhood and financial desperation, had no idea that accepting this offer would lead her down a path she never imagined, a path culminating in a marriage proposal that would leave her and everyone watching breathless. How could a simple act of kindness turn into something so profound? The answer, like the man offering it, was shrouded in secrets and unspoken desires, a dangerous game of trust and vulnerability. Could Sarah trust this man, or would she lose everything in the process? Sarah was a fighter, a single mom who'd learned to juggle motherhood and survival with a fierce determination. Her apartment, a cramped 2-bedroom in a rundown building, was her sanctuary, a place where she and her son, Leo, could pretend the world outside wasn't falling apart. Leo, with his bright, curious eyes and infectious laughter, was her world. He was the reason she worked 3 part-time jobs, each barely covering the essentials. But the weight of unpaid bills and the constant fear of homelessness was a crushing burden. One rainy afternoon, as Sarah rushed from her waitressing shift to pick Leo up from school, her phone rang. An unfamiliar, deep voice introduced himself as Mr. Alexander Thorne, a name she vaguely recognized from the news, a tech mogul known for his reclusive nature and immense wealth. He requested an urgent meeting. Intrigued and slightly apprehensive, she agreed. Alexander Thorne was a man of contrasts. His penthouse office, overlooking the city, was a stark display of modern luxury. He, however, was quiet, reserved, and almost painfully polite. His eyes, though, held a depth that made Sarah uneasy. He explained that he'd been observing her, impressed by her resilience and work ethic. He offered her a position as his personal assistant, a job that came with a salary that would solve all her financial woes. He also made it clear that this wasn't a typical job offer. "I understand you're in a difficult position, Ms. Evans," he said, his voice low and steady. "I believe you possess qualities I value: loyalty, dedication, and a strength of character that is rare. I have a proposition that will benefit us both, but it is unconventional." Sarah, wary but desperate, listened as he laid out the terms. The job was more than a job. It was an all-encompassing role, requiring her to be available at all hours, to travel with him, and to manage aspects of his life beyond professional duties. The salary was exorbitant, enough to secure a comfortable future for her and Leo. But the unspoken question hung in the air. What was the catch? What did he want in return? The setup establishes the stakes. Sarah's desperate situation, Alexander's enigmatic offer, and the growing sense of unease that something more is at play. Sarah accepted Alexander's offer, a mix of desperation and a sliver of hope overriding her lingering doubts. The first day was a whirlwind. Alexander's penthouse office, now her workspace, was a maze of sleek, minimalist design, a stark contrast to her cramped apartment. Her new job required her to manage his schedule, handle his correspondence, and even oversee aspects of his personal life, from coordinating his meals to managing his travel arrangements. It was an all-encompassing role, and the sheer scope of it was overwhelming. The existing staff, a tight-knit group of long-time employees, regarded her with suspicion. There was Ms. Evelyn, Alexander's stern, efficient head of operations, who watched Sarah's every move with a critical eye. "Mr. Thorne has never had a personal assistant," she'd stated coolly, her voice laced with thinly veiled disapproval. "He's always handled these matters himself." The implication was clear. Sarah was an interloper, an unknown quantity in their well-ordered world. Then there was Mark, the sharp-suited financial advisor, whose casual remarks often carried a double meaning. "Quite a change of scenery, isn't it, Sarah?" he'd said, his eyes lingering on her worn but neatly pressed dress. "From waitressing to managing a billionaire's life. Must be quite the adjustment." The lines between professional and personal began to blur almost immediately. Alexander, despite his reserved demeanor, often sought her company, requesting her opinion on matters beyond her job description. One evening, he asked her to join him for dinner, a simple request that felt loaded with unspoken implications. The setting was the penthouse's dining area, bathed in the soft glow of city lights, a world away from the noisy diner where she used to work. As he spoke about his work, his passions, and his loneliness, Sarah found herself drawn to him, despite her reservations. "You have a unique perspective, Sarah," he said, his voice low. "A freshness. I find it refreshing." The unspoken tension in the room was palpable. She found herself struggling to maintain a professional distance, her heart pounding as his gaze lingered on her. The job, initially a lifeline, was quickly becoming a complex web of emotions and uncertainties. Every interaction was a tightrope walk, and she felt the precariousness of her position with increasing anxiety. Sarah's internal conflict grew with each passing day. She was undeniably attracted to Alexander. His quiet intensity, his unexpected moments of vulnerability, and his genuine appreciation for her were a stark contrast to the men she'd encountered in her past. Yet, she was also terrified of losing her independence, of becoming dependent on him. The sheer power imbalance between them was a constant, unsettling reminder of her precarious position. Balancing her responsibilities to Leo with the demands of her new job proved to be a Herculean task. Alexander's work hours were erratic, often requiring her to stay late or travel at a moment's notice. She found herself relying on her neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, to pick Leo up from school and watch him until she could get home. The guilt gnawed at her, the fear that she was neglecting her son for the sake of financial security. One evening, as she rushed home after a particularly long day, Leo looked up at her with tired eyes. "Mommy, why are you always working?" he asked, his voice small. The question hit her like a physical blow. She knelt down, her heart aching. "Mommy's working hard so we can have a better life, sweetie," she said, her voice trembling. "But I miss you," he whispered, his eyes filling with tears. Alexander's secretive behavior added another layer of complexity to her growing unease. He was a man of few words, often retreating into his own world, his thoughts hidden behind a wall of polite reserve. There were moments when she caught him staring at her, his eyes filled with an intensity that made her shiver. But when she tried to engage him, to understand him, he would retreat, his expression becoming guarded. One night, as they worked late in his office, she noticed a framed photograph on his desk, a picture of a young woman with striking blue eyes. "Who is she?" she asked, her curiosity piqued. Alexander's expression darkened. He quickly turned the photograph face down. "Someone from my past," he said, his voice clipped. The unspoken message was clear. Some doors were not to be opened. His emotional distance created a barrier between them, a barrier that Sarah found both frustrating and intriguing. Sarah's curiosity about Alexander's past grew with each passing day. She noticed subtle clues, fleeting expressions of pain, and a guardedness that hinted at a deeper wound. One afternoon, while organizing his files, she stumbled upon a faded photograph tucked away in a drawer. It was a picture of a young Alexander, his face etched with a sadness that belied his current composure, standing beside the same woman from the photograph on his desk. Before she could examine it further, Alexander entered the room, his eyes narrowing as he saw the photograph in her hand. "That's private," he said, his voice sharp. The incident left her shaken, reinforcing her suspicion that he was hiding something. The mystery deepened when she received an unexpected call from a woman named Clara, who introduced herself as Alexander's estranged sister. Clara's voice was filled with a mix of urgency and concern. "You need to be careful, Sarah," she warned. "Alexander is not what he seems. He has issues. He's been hurt, and he hurts others in return." Clara revealed that Alexander had a history of controlling relationships and a deep-seated fear of abandonment. She hinted at a traumatic event in their past that had shaped his behavior, a secret that Alexander had kept hidden for years. "He's drawn to strong, independent women like you, Sarah," Clara explained. "But he doesn't know how to love. He only knows how to possess." This revelation cast Alexander's behavior in a new light. His intense interest in Sarah, his need for her constant presence, and his subtle attempts to control her decisions were no longer acts of kindness, but signs of a deeper, more troubling pattern. During a late-night work session, the tension between Alexander and Sarah reached a breaking point. As they discussed a business proposal, their conversation veered into personal territory. Sarah, emboldened by Clara's warning, confronted him about his past. "Why are you so afraid to let anyone in, Alexander?" she asked, her voice trembling. He turned away, his expression guarded. "That's none of your concern, Sarah," he said, his voice cold. "But it is," she insisted. "It affects everything. Our work, our relationship." He finally turned back to her, his eyes filled with a raw vulnerability that surprised her. "I've been hurt, Sarah," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "I don't know how to trust." The moment hung in the air, charged with unspoken emotions. The opulent penthouse office, with its panoramic city views, became a stage for their emotional confrontation, the soft glow of the city lights illuminating the pain in Alexander's eyes, and the determination in Sarah's. The emotional confrontation with Alexander left Sarah shaken, but also more determined to understand him. She began to see his behavior not as malicious, but as a desperate attempt to protect himself from further pain. However, she also understood that his methods were unhealthy and potentially dangerous. One evening, Alexander asked her to accompany him to a charity gala. It was a high-profile event, attended by the city's elite, and Sarah felt out of place in her simple dress. During the event, Alexander introduced her as his closest confidant, a term that made her uncomfortable. The attention from the other guests, their curious glances and whispered comments, added to her unease. As the night progressed, Sarah noticed Alexander becoming increasingly withdrawn, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for something. Suddenly he excused himself, leaving her alone amidst the crowd. She felt a pang of anxiety, a sense that something was wrong. She followed him, finding him in a secluded balcony overlooking the city. He was staring into the distance, his face etched with a familiar sadness. "Alexander, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice soft. He turned to her, his eyes filled with a raw vulnerability. "She's here," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Clara." Sarah's heart sank. She realized that Alexander's sister's presence was the source of his distress. Clara approached them, her expression a mix of concern and determination. "Alexander, we need to talk," she said, her voice firm. What followed was a tense and emotional exchange, a confrontation that revealed the deep-seated trauma that had shaped Alexander's life. Clara revealed that the woman in the photographs was their mother, who had abandoned them when they were children. Alexander's fear of abandonment, his need for control, stemmed from this childhood trauma. But the real shock came when Clara revealed that Alexander had been manipulating Sarah, not out of malice, but out of a desperate attempt to recreate a sense of family, a sense of security he had never known. Clara showed Sarah emails and texts that Alexander had been sending, describing a vision of a future with Sarah, a future he was trying to force into reality. This revelation was a devastating blow for Sarah. She realized that Alexander's offer, his job, his growing affection for her, were all part of a carefully constructed plan, a plan to fill the void in his life. The man she thought she was beginning to understand was, in fact, a stranger, a man driven by a desperate need to control and possess. The opulent city lights, once a symbol of Alexander's wealth and power, now seemed to mock her naivety. She felt betrayed, used, and utterly alone. The midpoint reversal had shattered her illusions, revealing the dark truth behind Alexander's seemingly generous offer. The air on the balcony crackled with unspoken tension, the city lights below a silent witness to the unraveling of Alexander's carefully constructed world. His face, usually an impenetrable mask, was now a raw display of vulnerability and desperation. "Yes, Clara is right," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. I needed you, Sarah. I needed someone to stay." His confession was a chilling echo of Clara's warnings, confirming Sarah's worst fears. Alexander's offer, his attentiveness, his growing affection, it was all a calculated performance, a desperate attempt to fill the void left by his mother's abandonment. He had seen in Sarah a strength, a resilience, a capacity for unwavering loyalty, and he had sought to possess it, to control it, to make it his own. "You didn't need me, Alexander," Sarah said, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and hurt. "You needed a ghost, a shadow of someone who doesn't exist. You needed to rewrite your past, and you tried to use me to do it." His eyes, filled with a desperate plea, searched hers. "I know it was wrong," he said, his voice cracking, "but I didn't know how else to make it right. I thought if I could just keep you close, if I could just make you stay." His words hung in the air, a chilling testament to his profound emotional damage. He had mistaken control for love, possession for security. He had sought to recreate a sense of family, a sense of belonging, by manipulating the life of another. The opulent city lights, once a symbol of his power, now seemed to mock his desperation, his inability to connect with another human being on genuine terms. "You created a prison, Alexander," Sarah said, her voice low and steady. "A gilded cage where I was supposed to play the role you assigned me. You offered me a lifeline, but you were drowning yourself." The truth was a bitter pill to swallow. The man she had started to care for, the man she had believed was capable of genuine affection, was a broken soul, trapped in a cycle of self-destruction. His actions, though driven by pain, had caused immense hurt. "I thought I could make it different this time," Alexander whispered, his voice filled with a desperate longing. "I thought I could make it stay." The admission was a raw, unfiltered glimpse into his tormented mind, a confession of his deepest fears and insecurities. The revelation hung heavy in the air, a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of unchecked emotional trauma. Sarah's reaction was a mix of anger, heartbreak, and a profound sense of betrayal. The man she had started to trust, to care for, had manipulated her, used her as a tool to fulfill his own emotional needs. The realization was a sharp, agonizing pain, a wound that cut deep. "You don't love me, Alexander," she said, her voice trembling. "You don't even know me. You love the idea of me, the fantasy you created in your head. You wanted to control me, to possess me, to make me stay, just like she left you." Her words hit him like a physical blow. He flinched, his eyes filled with a raw, wounded pain. "Don't," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Don't say that." "But it's true, isn't it?" she pressed, her voice rising. "You're so afraid of being abandoned that you'd rather trap someone than risk being alone. You'd rather create a lie than face the truth." The emotional tension reached its peak, the air thick with unspoken pain and regret. The opulent balcony, once a symbol of Alexander's power, now became a stage for their raw, unfiltered emotions. The city lights below seemed to mock their broken connection, their shattered illusions. I didn't mean to hurt you, Sarah, he said, his voice barely a whisper. I just wanted someone to stay. His admission was a raw, unfiltered glimpse into his tormented mind, a confession of his deepest fears and insecurities. But his pain did not excuse his actions. Sarah, despite her own hurt, saw the broken man beneath the facade, the wounded child trapped in a cycle of self-destruction. You need help, Alexander, she said, her voice soft but firm. You need to face your past, to heal your wounds. You can't keep living like this, hurting yourself and others. The emotional climax hung in the air, a moment of raw vulnerability and devastating truth. The consequences of Alexander's actions, the pain he had caused, and the broken trust between them were laid bare. The aftermath of the confrontation left a heavy silence, the air thick with unspoken emotions. Sarah, despite the pain and betrayal, felt a strange sense of clarity. She understood Alexander's actions, his desperate need to control, but she also recognized the destructive pattern that had consumed him. She decided to leave, to walk away from the gilded cage he had created. I can't stay here, Alexander, she said, her voice steady. I need to build a life for myself and Leo, a life free from your control. Alexander didn't try to stop her. He simply nodded, his eyes filled with a quiet resignation. I understand, he said, his voice barely a whisper. I'm sorry, Sarah. I truly am. The following days were a blur. Sarah moved back into her old apartment, the cramped space now a welcome sanctuary. She focused on rebuilding her life, on providing a stable and loving environment for Leo. She returned to her old jobs, the familiar rhythm of her daily routine, a comforting balm to her wounded spirit. Alexander, meanwhile, began to seek help. He started therapy, confronting the demons of his past, the trauma that had shaped his behavior. He realized that his need to control, his fear of abandonment, had pushed everyone away, leaving him isolated and alone. Weeks turned into months. Sarah received an unexpected letter from Alexander. He apologized for his actions, for the pain he had caused. He admitted that he had been wrong, that he had mistaken control for love. He expressed his gratitude for her honesty, for showing him the truth about himself. He also revealed that he had made significant changes in his life. He had stepped down from his position as CEO, dedicating his time and resources to charitable causes. He had reconnected with Clara, mending their fractured relationship. One afternoon, Sarah received a visit from Clara. She brought a letter from Alexander, a letter that contained a proposal, not of marriage, but of partnership. He proposed a joint venture, a foundation dedicated to helping single mothers like herself, providing them with the resources and support they needed to build a better future. Sarah was surprised, but also touched. She saw in his proposal a genuine attempt to atone for his past mistakes, to use his wealth and influence for good. She agreed to meet with him, to discuss the foundation, to see if he had truly changed. Their meeting was different. Alexander was calmer, more grounded, his eyes filled with a quiet sincerity. He spoke of his desire to make amends, to use his experiences to help others. He didn't offer apologies or excuses, but rather a genuine commitment to change. The resolution wasn't a fairy tale ending, but a realistic portrayal of growth and redemption. Alexander had made mistakes, had caused pain, but he was willing to learn from them, to become a better person. And Sarah, despite her own hurt, was willing to give him a chance, to see if he could truly transform. The moral takeaway was clear. Everyone deserves a second chance, but redemption requires genuine change, a willingness to confront one's demons and make amends. Sarah looked at Alexander, a question hanging in the air. Can people really change, Or are we all just bound to repeat our mistakes? And with that, the story ends, leaving the audience to ponder the complexities of human nature, the power of redemption, and the possibility of genuine transformation.